Okay, I've got it all set up and we'll start the slideshow now. Kia ora koutou. My name is Pendergrast and I am the Operations Manager at the New Zealand Centre of Digital Excellence, aka CodeNZ. I've got a 25-minute presentation here, so I'm not going to spend a long time with intros and going through my life story or anything. Let's just say that I'm someone, I manage grants as probably the biggest part of my job, but I talk almost constantly with developers about industry needs, where they're at, what their problems are, what we can be doing to help them. And I'm going to be talking today about skills growth in Aotearoa. Now, skills growth is a big issue around everywhere, anywhere in tech, all over the world, in terms of anything to do with happening in the games industry in this region. It is a hot button issue. It is, in fact, the biggest issue in the video games industry in this region. So when I have a conversation, because I work in funding, most people think that, most developers will come to me and say, hey, funding is actually our biggest issue. And it might be particularly down the indie end of the chain. But overall, skills growth and development is the single biggest issue because it actually affects everyone from the smallest one-person indie team right through to large corporations with hundreds of employees at any particular site. So it's this ongoing, it's highly complex, and it's not something that it can be fixed overnight. This talk today is about how we're tackling it with Code in New Zealand. And we've been talking about this for a very long time now. I pulled out this quote. This quote's from 2011, so not long after the games industry was beginning its recovery after after the global financial crises back in 2019, 2010, or 2009, 2010. So we've been talking about this for a long, long time, and we still, I mean, it is a global issue, so it's not going to be something that's going to necessarily even be fixable in its entirety, but it is something where you can change your local landscape. And this talk will be about, well, these problems are, but also how you can implement a solution. Why is it the biggest problem? I mean, we see a steady stream of graduates, right? And you would think with more, there's going to be lots of photos of Dunedin in this because that's where Code is, by the way. It's going to be a very Dunedin flavored lecture, not my bad. Anyway, so we've got a steady stream of graduates. The universities, the private colleges, the media schools, they all churn them out year on year. And I mean, it has been this, the old figure used to be around 4,000 graduates for every one job in the video game industry in Australia, where I'm from. But the reality is that there's a lot of graduates, but it's very difficult to upskill and become more than a graduate. Getting that experience, a lot of people who graduate in video game related disciplines, either like literally a bachelor of game development or however that looks like at your particular institution, I actually just pretty much do that and then leave the industry and go and work somewhere else. Tertiary institutions, I would say, they concentrate on a lot of the more nuts and bolts skills of the video game industry. And of course, a lot of the people attending this conference will be engineers and artists and programmers and some variation on more technical disciplines. I mean, it is technically games. But then tertiary institutions miss out on certain bits, like show me where the QA course is. Show me where the business in games course is, like the business of indie games. That should be a course, and people should do that because, of course, then schools sell and the universities sell the dream of starting your own business. So there's no, like, graduates leave their institution, and a lot of time they're not industry ready. So there is a gap there, and the need to employ seniors. If I'm at a small company, I might be struggling to actually afford to upskill a worker. And certainly, I mean, I've seen that over the years with many different little businesses. It is, particularly for small businesses, it is an issue. And like I said, this affects all sizes from, I mean, even if you're a single person developer, your own skills growth is going to be a particular issue. And then we added incentives. So they became a hiring run. Incentives popping up all over on a state-by-state basis around Australia at the moment. Obviously, they've announced the National Digital Games Tax Offset. So there is a hiring run going on in anticipation of that. In New Zealand, I mean, it's a highly mature environment. You've got about 10 or 20 really big companies that are trying to take all things, and of course, everybody's looking. Worldwide, the industry is just booming right now because of the pandemic, not despite it, because of course, industry revenue is up, so everyone's looking to hire and get more product to market. And the other thing too is the game engines, Unity and Unreal, probably the big ones, have done a really great job of selling their software into other industries adjacent to games. I live in Perth at the moment because borders, so I'm trying to still get to New Zealand, in the mining capital of the universe. And for a while there, I was getting phone calls 3 times a week from people, from a recruitment agent in Perth looking to hire senior Unity engineers for Rio Tinto. And that's because all their simulation and their control room software is now built in Unity. So again, mining, medtech, virtual production, defense, they all hire games, and they're not interested in hiring graduates, they're interested in hiring senior game developers because of course, I mean, and this is when we get into that scenario, like in games, no one's life's really depending on whether your software works. In mining and defense, that's the exact opposite is true. So they want to hire seniors, and that's exacerbated this particular issue. And this is the point. Now, I've been working with government on and off. I mean, I largely sort of switched over about 3 years ago to what became the main thing that I did. I've been working with government for a while now in one form or another. And governments do have a duty in this space, right? It is something that if you are not in a jurisdiction where you've spoken to government about it actively, it is something that the industry needs to be talking to government about, because it is government's duty. If government wants to have industries in their place, they need to create the right conditions for that industry. And a lot of that isn't about seeing the value of the video game industry, but governments around Australia have done that, and New Zealand. I mean, I work for an aligned body to the New Zealand national government. So they do see the value, but it's part of a further conversation about what are our needs. But then companies will see the ability to invest in a particular location, and they will want to, if the conditions are right, then they can go in and start a seed and then actually want to take in and make those investments. And then there's this thing about the triple part of this triangle is the economy and the broader public benefit from having the industry in the location, and that's jobs, and that's cultural landscape, and that's all the side businesses that come off, all the service businesses, the accountants and the lawyers and the third-party companies that service those businesses. And so governments can actually stimulate this and help to change the skills growth in an area. And that's something that if you are a developer and if you're feeling it and you're not part of an organization who's having those conversations with the government in your jurisdiction, it's actually time to think about doing that. It's something that you can do. It's a long road, don't get me wrong. Dealing with governments takes years, but it's something that we can all do. And then you throw in the added issue, particularly in pandemic land with remote workers. I've got a worker in Berlin. I've got a worker in Johannesburg. That's something that governments can't be relied on to fix, because of course, if the governments are going to concentrate on spending their money inside their own jurisdiction. So it's not all up to governments. These are organizations and things that you can do to help change this landscape. So university intake programs, talking to the universities about what courses are on offer, talking to their careers people and going, oh, hey, look, there's a gap in the knowledge. And companies who are working in the area can have that dialogue with universities as well. Co-working spaces. Co-working spaces we've seen with the arcade, and we're seeing other, like, I mean, in New Zealand, code works out of Petri dish. There are several different game developers, different sorts that work in that co-working space, and the community is there, and that shows skills just inherently. It's casual. I mean, like, unless you're going to have a rolling series of workshops and things, it is quite casual, but it's just there because someone will know how to fix the problem. Screen organizations. Now, I've consulted to a lot of different screen organizations across this region, Film Commission, Screen Queensland, Screen Tasmania. They are part of this equation. And of course, Code in its way is a specialized screen organization that only works on games. We have a part to play because it is our job to disperse money on behalf of governments. We might not be government ourselves. Code's not actually owned by the government. And I know certain other organizations are actually not for profits. So they have part of this. Industry stakeholders. So these are other industry groups and adjacent bodies who actually feed out. So again, looking at a mining company who invests in simulation, they have a duty to upskill their own workforce as well. And the other ones, and this is a big one that I'm going to return to here, and this is company recruitment policies and inclusive hiring practices. Now, we talk a lot in government space and in game space about inclusivity and diversity programs and all that. And it's a buzzword thing that comes up and we all talk about it. And of course, lots of people have lots of different opinions on it. But this is not a touchy-feely thing. This is about growing your potential hiring pool and growing your workforce. If you have a policy in your company which makes it difficult for parents to work for you because you have to be at the company at a certain place at a certain time during these set hours, if that's restrictive, then you are locking parents out of your company because parents have school runs. Parents have to go to the kids' assembly occasionally. It's just, you've got to be flexible when you've got people with different needs. And because the other thing too is, on the parents example, parents are often more mature workers. So they're often got experience and higher skills. And if you're making your place hostile for them to work, you are going to miss out on that labor pool. But that applies to all other areas where including inclusive hiring practices. And actually it goes further than that. Making the day-to-day working environment inclusive has serious benefits for retention of skills. And of course, senior people who upskill others. So what can your organization do? And of course, I'm here to tell you what Code's doing, but this is not a one-way street. Code is an organization that invests in other organizations. And so if you have a screen agency in your area, then giving them the ability to again, working as part of that equation, having that dialogue going and demonstrating that you aren't just sitting around complaining about this particular problem, but is something that you could work together on and making the environment more sustainable on. And that's hiring graduates and juniors and investing in them. Actually making the jump. Look, Mighty Kingdom in Adelaide has got one of the most amazing university recruitment programs in this region. And they are known to be a great place to work, partly because of this. And so they will invest and they will upskill, and because of that, their staff retention is amazing and their culture is amazing. Mighty Kingdom is a pretty awesome place to work. And it's a pretty awesome place to come as a graduate, upskill, and because they will invest in you and they will see the returns out. Implementing your own personal development plans. At Code, there are 4 employees. We're not a big organization at all. We each have a PDP. It's not something that big companies need to do. Even if you're a small company, work out a plan. Even if it's just yourself as a lone indie dev, work out a plan about how you're going to increase your skills and actually write it down. It doesn't matter if it changes. If it changes, then you change it. But just having a plan is better than having no plan. And then, of course, preaching to the choir here. Conferences, yeah, okay, you're all at an online conference right now. But when conferences open up physically again, obviously, pandemic stuff notwithstanding, and be safe first, but it's a great places to be. Not only, it's not only because of the material and the lectures, but it's having meeting peers, meeting people who do the same stuff you do, and forming those networks and having people that you can talk about to help. And that's something like I do it all the time, because the people I work remotely, I have people I chat to every day. I met them all at various conferences, and then test my ideas. Hey, look, this is something that I want to try. What do you think? Instead of, and because of that, I have learned things, and that's gone in part of my skills base. And then aim for staff retention rather than just salaries. So there is a bit of salary creep going on in our industry in this region at the moment. But making your policies around holding on to staff rather than just flashing big numbers at them, looking after them, doing that whole 360 approach with them, and so you are investing in them, that they feel it's a good environment to work in. You'll hold on to them longer. Staff, generally speaking, most staff will learn over time. They will continue to learn. We live in an innovative industry where everyone tends to keep track. They all have set ways they like to do things, but then something comes along and challenges that because the environment's changed. And that moves everything on from there. But the longer you can hold on to a staff, of course, you watch them grow through the ranks. And I see that, and Runaway in Dunedin, where Code is. It's another great company where they invest heavily in staff, and they hold on to staff for years. And people stay them. I mean, the company's nearly 10 years old now, and they've got people that have been with them since very early. Fantastic, and they've grown in seniority over that time. And of course, because they bought into the company culture, it's more than just salary. So this is the bit where I get to talk about Code and what we are doing in our particular jurisdiction. So for those who don't know, Code is in Aotearoa, Dunedin, which is in New Zealand, South Island. It's a city of about 120,000 people, so it's not big. It's certainly not Sydney or Melbourne. And this is a regional development plan. So the whole point was, when you look in New Zealand, you've got Auckland and Wellington, which have reached maturity in their hiring markets. It's difficult to make hires of skilled game developers in those other cities. So they're opening up a new strategy. We offer grant finance from entry-level prototyping right through to an enterprise-level grant that we offer, which is about 250K NZ. Entry level, you can come and make a prototype and apply for 40K. And that's as long as you've got some proof that you can actually, make a prototype. That's pretty much what you need. And of course, the written application process. It's always a catch to go and get that money. We work in education in conjunction with other organisations. That in Dunedin there is a Polytech and the University of Aotearoa. And we've got lots of cooperation with that and with schools as well. But we do work with other organisations. We're now introducing a specific program around Indigenous people. So Māori and Pacifica people in games in New Zealand don't make up a high percentage of the workforce. And a lot of that has got to do with the fact that there is a cultural thing for Māori people in pursuing tech or academic careers. So breaking down those barriers and making our industry accessible, because games are made by people. So opening it up. This is the thing. Inclusive workplace practices means that you've got more people to choose for in a hiring pool. We have a Games for Health program that's on its way coming in next year. And we do a lot of, again, we're sort of dealing in New Zealand, we're dealing with COVID restrictions at the moment. But we do a lot of events, and we've got community stuff that we do as well. So it's all about getting everyone together, and the phrase critical mass gets bandied around. How does grant funding grow skills? The short version is it gives people a place to experiment. It gives people, indie devs who've never had a chance to make anything, the space to make something and to actually not, to eat and pay bills while they're doing it. Most entry-level grants won't result in new companies, but giving people the space to start a thing, finish a thing, it helps them, it grows their skills. You've learned something along the way because you've prototyped a new thing, and that then goes back into the pool of labour. And of course, like I say, shared labour across small grants. means that people will cross-pollinate into different projects. We spend a lot of time in education, and this is something that is growing, and this will be our focus in the new year. So we already have a series of rolling monthly workshops, and we concentrate on underserved areas in the existing tertiary organizations. QA, narrative design, pitching games to publishers, hiring practices. We do these like usually they're a 2-day workshop. We do it so we do 2 5-hour days. We deliver them over Zoom because there's no accessibility thing, and because it's pandemic proof to plan like that. We have other programs coming in the new year, which will be in person, and we invest in those skills that fall through the gaps in tertiary institutions. And you can come along if you're in our group, in our community. You can come along and participate for free. And it doesn't matter if you work for a large company or a small company, or it's just yourself. You can just register and join in. And we also record them for people that can't make it on the day if it's a Zoom delivery. We also hire mentors. We have a pool of mentors, and you don't even have to be a successful applicant through any of our grant programs to get it. If you're someone who's struggling and you need help, you can talk to us, and we may assign a mentor. We usually do it with our grant programs. If someone's received a grant and they're struggling in a particular area, then we can hire a mentor off our budget, not their grant budget. Phase 2, we are implementing school game dev clubs to help, again, broaden our base, make it accessible for people who are not usual targets, including Māori and Pacifica people. Girls, I mean, that's just, we're still lagging behind as an industry in terms of gender equity in who we hire, and other children from underrepresented backgrounds. Then we're moving forward past that into a Māori-centric hiring or industry on-learning program, where we'll be looking at grants and mentorship and targeted directly on growing and making the industry accessible and breaking down those barriers, because then that's 15% of the New Zealand population that opens up for hiring and skills. And also, like Māori games, just like a whole, it's only just starting up now as a movement, but some just amazing products coming out of there right now, just exciting. And phase 4, of course, is that we're looking to make a full Dunedin School of Games. It won't be called that. It's going to be a couple of years away, but we're looking at pulling in and creating this whole incubator process to get people from high school to placement into industry and come out with a greater skills base. We work on that note to the Future Games model, which is a model from an organization in Sweden. So we're looking at creating a single campus with placements from the university, polytechnic, actual developers, including mature companies, as well as indie dev companies on the same campus, and mixing in hot desking, creating this whole thing, and of course paid internships. So we will have a paid internship program allowing to put students on their last years, to give them into companies for academic credit. And we're looking at what flexible options that we can do to get those placements going. Because again, we want to be in a position where we're growing the skills base and people are getting jobs, because the students and graduates aren't even touching the sides. They're not going to go on time for unemployment because they've already been hired by the time they get out of uni or polytechnic. And this is what we're looking for in the outcomes, in a really practical manner, from school to industry placement, straight through. Underserved demographics get a boost. So we're a Treaty Waitangi organisation, so we're meeting our obligations there, and we're getting more people who otherwise wouldn't look at games as a career into the industry, and that is a great way of boosting skills. Reducing costs for developers and hiring, because we've created this really awesome pool, and we'll look at the internship practice stuff. The industry, even then, people can, a senior developer can nip across the floor, like nip across the hallway, go to a lecture, go back to their working day. And the growth of the local skills base in job creation and retention, boosting the local economy, which is the #1 goal. This is what this is all about. So if you need to find me, you can find me with all these methods. Code NZ is our official Twitter. This is my unofficial one where I rant and I say dumb shit. Enjoy that. Or search for me in LinkedIn if you want to know more about how code is it, or how we even have a chat about how you can do it in your local area. Or if you want to go and jump on our Discord, just DM me.